Okay. Welcome everyone. You're here at WeHo Reads, Feminism and Fearlessness, and I am joined by four amazing writers, and I'm going to let them take the stage in just a moment after I make a set of quick introductions. We're joined by Katya Apekina, who is an award-winning novelist, screenwriter, and translator, whose second novel, Mother Doll, was named a Best Book of 2024 by Vogue. Olga García Echeverría is a bilingual poet and cultural archivist whose work amplifies queer and feminist voices, including her stewardship of the literary legacy of lesbian Colombian writer Tatiana de la Tierra. Welcome, Olga. Uh, Angelina Sáenz is joining us. She is an award-winning educator, poet, and author of Waiting for Luna, a children's story, and two poetry collections, Edgecliff and Maestra. Welcome, Angelina. We met actually last year in Boyle Heights, and that was really fun. So I'm glad that you were able to join us tonight. And last but not least, Kate Stayman-London, who is the best-selling author of Watch and Fang Fiction. She's also a screenwriter and a political strategist. Welcome, Kate. So I'm not going to say much about this current cultural, political, fucked up moment that we all are living through, but I am excited to hear from each of these writers because they are pushing the envelope in various ways as it relates to gender equality and the literary arts as a platform for activism. So what I'd like to start with is a little bit of discussion, and I've asked each writer to share perspectives on being a writer at this moment when feminism and gender equality are under attack. And so, Katya, would you like to begin?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I think as a writer, I gravitate towards stories about women. That's just naturally what I'm interested in. As a woman, as an immigrant and a refugee, the current moment is pretty terrible. But I feel like writing requires a lot of empathy, to be able to think about to just imagine the world through the eyes of your characters who are different than you, to try to understand how they see the world. It's like such a big part of my practice, and I think it's really what's missing right now is that empathy and that ability to imagine other people's realities. And I think fiction is one of the things that really helps people with that and makes people feel seen and less alone. So I think that's really all I have to say about it.
Thank you, Katya. Yeah, I'm interested when we get into the discussion later of this idea of where we're writing from and what we're writing toward, and how that changes over time and as the, like kind of the macro situation evolves. Thank you. Let's see. Olga, would you like to share your perspective?
Um, Hello, everyone. Um, I think that for me, yes, it's a horrible time right now, but I also feel like as women, um, as queer people, as people of color, as marginalized communities, we've been facing a lot of what's happening right now, maybe to lesser degrees, and it's escalated right now. But I feel that it's been going on for a very long time. And I think that myself as a writer, I write poetry and creative nonfiction. So where I'm coming from is, you know, to talk about what I embody and what my community embodies, communities, and that for me is intersectional always. So it involves race, class, sexuality, and gender. um, I feel that there's so much power in language, and that language has historically been used as a weapon in warfare. in colonization, in occupation. And we can go back 500 years and look at the way language was used, or we can look at the moment right now and see how language is being used. And then the flip side of that is, for me, that language is also a very powerful tool in liberation, in transformation, also in creation, like in creating, like to be able to manifest and even envision something different, right? That we need language for that. This is why language is so alive, that it's always sort of moving, and we have to keep creating new words because the world is moving and the reality is moving. And so I look at language, I look at the question that you're asking through the power of language, and of all the different things that we can actually do with it as a tool for transformation and creation. And I want to focus on that, although I think it's very important to also be able to name and talk about the systems of oppression that we have historically lived under and that we're under right now, but also to be able to use the language for envisioning and creating something different.
Thank you, Olga. I think that's a really powerful distinction, pushing back against the systems of oppression, but also distinct from that, looking ahead and how we lead a transformation using language. Really interesting. Angelina? Angelina, being a writer during this moment.
Yes. Well, I kind of want to piggyback on what Olga said, and that is, I find myself at this moment um, not really having the sky is falling feeling that is really amplified around me, because my whole life I have been surrounded um, within my family and within my community and within the students and families that I work with, an endless oppression, right? So incarceration, addiction, deportation, violence. And so where folks are feeling like, the rug is being pulled out from under me, I basically write to help my people remember and name and heal what our experience has been. So this moment for me is just a continuation of all of the writing that I've done my whole life.
Thank you. That's powerful. Remembering, naming, and healing as a frame. Thank you, Angelina. Kate.
Hi. So I actually began my career working in politics, and I worked as the lead writer for Hillary Clinton's digital team in 2016. So my relationship to the past 8 years and the ongoing situation is it's a complicated relationship, and then also to have made the transition in that time to being a full-time novelist and TV writer. I think it can be hard, right? Because as everyone else has said so eloquently, we're still so directly engaged in the work, even though it's different than going into a campaign office every day and writing, a video for the internet or a fundraising email or, God forbid, whatever I may have been working on during that time. But for me, those values, it's the same, right? So the same values that motivated me to work in politics are the values that motivate me to write books, and to whatever extent I can control it, whatever I'm able to write on television. And for me, when I'm writing, I like to make people happy with my work, but I also really like to try and be provocative when I can. And I'm always kind of into your question of what are we writing toward? For me, it's about comfort and it's about empowerment. And so about writing about characters, their journey to stepping into their power, and encouraging you as a reader to maybe consider how you can do that more in your own life. And I think that right now we need that as much as we've ever needed it. Although, as Angelina importantly pointed out, has been like this for quite some time for a lot of communities. But I think giving people that comfort, giving them those stories that they can escape into, but then also saying, okay, what can you take from these stories and how can you then bring that to your own life and bring it to a greater level of empowerment in your community? That's how I'm trying to locate myself now.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting, the themes that are coming out around comfort and healing and how we take care of each other, how we live through difficult times. And there's a lot of, history and lessons to be learned there that aren't just from this current moment, but from historical moments too, which I hope makes for a good pivot towards this question of what we're writing about. I would love to hear from each of you and learn a little bit more about the subject matter that you tackle, whether it's poetry or in your novels, and particularly focused on the difficult subjects, those that you maybe had some hesitation to write about for how it for putting yourself through the ringer or through how it might be received, and how you pushed past any concerns to really um, to bring those difficult subject matters to life. And this time, does anyone would like to go first? Or we can go like kind of in alphabetical order again, whichever you all prefer. Maybe Katya?
Sure. Um, so a subject that I kind of keep coming back to is this idea of inherited trauma. And it's one of those things where when I had a child of my own, um, it just a lot of well, first of all, like when she was growing up, there were things from my own like early childhood that I hadn't really processed or thought about until I saw her at those ages. I was able to kind of remember my own experiences from that time. And my work is not autobiographical in any direct way, but this idea of like, what is it that we've been handed and that we're handing down, is something that I think about all the time, like in my work and in my life. There's just so many things that I take for granted as my own that are actually not my own, but were handed to me by like my mother, my grandmother, fears, things like that, that I just always have taken for granted as mine. And then there comes these moments where suddenly I'm able to kind of separate out from them and see them as not mine at all, but something that was like externally given to me. And so I don't know if this is like particularly like scary for me to write about. I mean, I think anytime you write honestly, it feels very vulnerable. Um, but I feel like, uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think because I write fiction, not nonfiction, there's always like a little bit of space. And because I'm not really writing, I mean, I draw on my own experiences and definitely on my own like emotional experiences, if not my own like physical experiences. Um, but I feel like that kind of gives me a little bit of space to be, I think, braver. I think it would be more difficult if I was writing nonfiction about my family, just thinking about, like what's my story to tell, what's not my story to tell. With fiction, you have a little more leeway. So anyway, those are some thoughts.
Yeah, the personal truth is more veiled in fiction. I love this idea of what we inherit unknowingly, um, and take on as our own. Um, Olga.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, I'm curious about in your writing, tackling subject matter that you may find difficult, either personally, emotionally, or difficult in that it's a challenge for how you want to present it to the world. And I've read some of your work, and I was thinking about this project that you did. I guess it was around 2021, where you asked students to share some of the language that they turned to from when they were growing up and what it means to them, which I thought was really, really interesting. But I'm mostly interested in yeah, what subject matter you tackle that you find difficult and how you decide to move past that.
Um, some of the things that keep showing up in my work, I think I don't usually decide like I'm going to write about this and then sit down and like I'm going to write about immigration and I'm going to sit down and write about immigration. It doesn't really happen that way for me, but I am in the world and my parents and, my family um, are immigrants. I was born here in the United States, but I come from a mixed status family. It's the reality that we live with, and also just the communities that I'm in and the people, the students that I work with. So, of course, then that issue is going to show up in my work. I love stories, and I'm fascinated by myths, um, legends, but also people's personal stories. And I feel that the challenge that I have a lot of times is not so much the subject matter, although there are subject matters that sometimes I have to struggle with. Like, I'm so pissed. Like, how do I, I'm trying to figure out how to best, I don't know, just how to express myself. But I think more than the subject matter is what I'm writing against, and some of that is stuff that I've internalized, and it goes back to systems of inequality, and also to colonization, right? I think that, in so many ways that, I don't believe in this post-colonial world. We've been impacted in so many ways. So I'm writing against erasure, against silence in my own family, but also silence in my community. I used to feel that I was writing against illiteracy because I come from a family, intergenerationally, that didn't really have access to education. My father only went to elementary school for 3 years, and so he was only semi-literate. My parents and my grandparents didn't have a chance to, study, go to school. I'm the first in my family to go to college, to get a college degree. And, for me, from early on, being sort of placed in special classrooms, because of my language, there was always this internal thing that, the language didn't belong to me, English, or that people in my community didn't write books, or that our stories did not matter. Of course, none of this is true. Of course, they matter. But when you don't see yourself mirrored in literature, it does impact how you see yourself and, how you move in the world. So I'm always writing against that, because even though I know it's not true, it creeps up, it creeps up in my writing sometimes. Like, I have to, like, does anyone care about this story? Why do I, whatever it is, insecurities around language, which I love. I love to play with language. But, even as somebody who was born and raised in the United States, yeah, I mean, I was placed in special classrooms because my English wasn't, what it was supposed to be, right? Because I had an accent or something from the Republic of East LA. I don't know. All of those things. Those are the things I struggle with as a writer.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I want to eventually come back later in the program to this idea of writing against silence, because I think it's an important one. Kate, to round out this section of the panel, would you like to share your thoughts on tackling difficult subject matter or subjects that can be difficult to address?
Sure. I write romantic comedies, which I think probably isn't the first genre to spring to mind when you think about tackling difficult subjects. And it is, of course, exactly what I use the genre to do. I think that there's a certain freedom in when you're really writing pretty much exclusively for an audience of women and queer folks, you kind of get to skate under the radar a little bit and talk about have some more difficult conversations with the audience that is my intended audience for that conversation. So I feel really lucky in a way to be working in that genre. And so that said, my most recent novel, Fang Fiction, is a vampire romantic comedy about a sexual assault survivor who is dealing with her PTSD and her insomnia and sort of finds a connection with a vampire who is also, of course, by definition, a night creature because of not being allowed to go outside in the sunlight. But it was a really, for me, a difficult story and a really empowering story and an exciting way to write about something that mattered a lot to me. And to be quite candid, the reactions have been quite disparate to it. I have readers who are like, this story has changed my life. Thank you for writing it. And I have had people say, how dare you write about a subject like this in a romantic comedy? Because this is my comfort food, and I don't want to read about sexual assault in a novel like this. And to that person, I say, you are welcome to put down the book at any time. There's an author's note telling you exactly what it's about at the beginning. You are very welcome to read something else. The only way I know how to do it is to write about something that's important to me. And I will say every time I'm about to have a book come out, I have that moment of like, oh no, I've made a huge mistake and I've written about something I care about a lot that's deeply personal to me. And now a lot of strangers are going to read about it and have opinions, which is devastating and terrifying always. But there's an artist named Mal Bustamante who has a quote that I keep in my phone that is, I am not responsible for your experience of my work, which I think is like a pretty counterintuitive idea for artists because we're writing for other people to experience our work. And especially when you're writing in a popular genre like I am, but actually we're not in control of what anyone else is bringing to the table. And kind of all I can control is, am I writing about something I care about? Am I putting forth my best work? Am I hopefully doing justice to the story that I'm trying to tell? And then everything else is kind of up to the reader. So I think it's an amazing question, and I'm really loving hearing what everyone has to say about it.
Thank you, Kate. That entry point into the vampire story, which is not about an innocent, losing their innocence, but about someone who's been through something very, very rough and trying to hold on and heal, is a really interesting take, and I'm glad you shared that with us. So at this point in the program, I have a little bit of like thank yous to do, a lot of gratitude to spread around. So first of all, thank you to the City of West Hollywood for making this WeHo Reads series possible. And thank you to Poets and Writers for some additional financial support through their mini grant program. Thank you to our media partners, Book Soup and LA Review of Books, for helping spread the word about this. And we tried something new this time, an initiative we're calling Read Local, where we asked folks to take a look at these books um, and share a little bit about them online. So thank you to Danielle Davis, Joseph Ray, Jessica from A Bottle and a Book, and Lisbeth Koyman for sharing their thoughts on the books and work by these writers. With that, I am going to also mention that as part of that initiative, Bookswell donated $100 each to the following organizations: El Otro Lado, National Sexual Assault Hotline, the Trans Latina Coalition, and CARE California, which are all doing amazing work to help communities. And so, again, thank you. We're also highlighting tonight Women Who Submit, which is a literary organization for women and non-binary writers, and the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. I will link to all of these in the chat. If you're feeling generous and you want to get involved and do something, you feel free to make a donation to those organizations. With that, I'm turning this over to Mike Che, the arts coordinator for the City of West Hollywood, to tell you a little bit more about the WeHo Reads series.
Hi there. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you to our panelists. It is so great to hear your words and to hear your stories. It's really an act of courage to share your thoughts and really bring that joy into the world. We do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land which the city of West Hollywood currently is upon is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and the Gabrielino Teach peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands. WeHo Reads is a program that is funded wholly by the city of West Hollywood. It is our passion to bring literary arts to the community, and we've got an entire, besides this series, we've got April Poetry Month coming up. We've got a great event next month on April 16 with Richard Blanco, who is the poet, inaugural poet for Barack Obama, who will be in conversation with our former poet laureate, Kim Dower. So that's going to be a fantastic conversation. I hope you'll join us for that. Our current poet laureate is Jen Chang. She is fantastic. She'll be sharing a new poem on April 7th at our council meeting that she's written for the city of West Hollywood. And she'll also be doing a writing workshop on the 19th of April. That's all going to be on our website at weho.org/arts. But most of all, thank you to the authors. Thank you to Cody for organizing this. Thank you to our audience for coming. And thank you to our city council who supports this every year and it makes this possible. We are honored that one of our council members, actually our mayor, is joining us today, Mayor Byers. Hi, we're so thrilled that you're joining us. Please, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And hi, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to pop in and first say Happy Women's History Month and recognize all the important events and actions that are taking place now and need to continue throughout the year in order to uplift and empower women. I was really motivated and inspired by this title of the event, Feminism and Fearlessness. I think the call to be fearless right now in the face of everything that's happening and feels so much more present in the ways that it does right now and every day is really emboldening, frankly. And it feels like we have choices just to sort of back down and shrink to the moment. And that would be totally fine given everything it feels like we're up against, but it isn't the way forward for everyone. And so the call for fearlessness is just, more important than ever. And I think the many authors here tonight who are bringing that forward in the ways that you do through joy and creative expression. And I appreciate you so much. I just also wanted to recognize the audience tonight who helps make these events possible. We are in the middle of budget discussions and these events are always a priority to many of us on council. And I'm happy to continue support for this and because of folks like you who show up. So I thank you. And just finally want to thank Mike and Cody for helping make this program possible. I know you bring a lot of care into this because you enjoy it yourself. And that means a lot to the city that we have folks like you championing this work. So thank you all, and I'll get back to it. And sorry for crashing in earlier. That was very embarrassing and totally not my smoothest move, but enjoy the rest of the night. And thank you all again.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. We greatly appreciate it, and we're glad you were able to join us tonight. And with that, I am keeping us on time. It's 7 o'clock, and Katya, I would love if you could share some thoughts about this book, if you'd like, Mother Doll.
Sure, but would Angelina like to answer the previous question? I don't think she got to.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
That's okay. I'll cover it in my 10 minutes.
You will? Okay.
Don't worry about it. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, so I guess I'll talk a little bit about like the ideas leading up to Mother Doll, and then I'll just read a little bit from the beginning. My grandmother had written these memoirs in Russian and had given them to me, and they sat on my computer for like over a decade, and I didn't open them. And I was always curious about her life, and I couldn't really like exactly say why I couldn't bring myself to read her memoirs, but it was like there was just this resistance that I felt because I think I thought if I knew her story, it would become my burden to take on, in a sense. And it was only after she died, like literally on the night of her funeral that I opened the document and I started reading it and I started translating it because I was thinking, you know, my daughter might want to one day be able to read it. And it was very strange because as I was translating it, I was like asking her questions in the margins. And so it sort of felt like I was suddenly like in a conversation with her. And in a lot of ways, the conversation was a lot more honest than it probably would have been when she was alive. And it felt strange to be like having an argument with a dead person through a text, through their sort of text. And her story was a difficult one. Her family had been murdered. She had escaped from Poland, literally like on foot. She escaped into the Soviet Union, into Russia. And anyway, so in the process of reading it, I felt really like connected with her after death. And then I sort of took that idea of talking to a dead relative and, you know, I fictionalized it. And it's in my book, it's through a psychic medium that my main character, Zhenya, is in conversation with her great-grandmother, who was a Russian revolutionary. And she talks to her right as her own grandmother, who is like someone who raised her and who she was very close with, is in like kind of a half alive, half dead state where she can no longer communicate. She's still alive, but she's not really there anymore. And so that's sort of the premise of the book. As she's talking to her great-grandmother, she gains sort of a deeper understanding of her family trauma, why her grandmother was the way that she was, why her mother was the way that she was, and why she herself is the way that she is, you know, because there's a lot of things about her own behavior that feel inexplicable to her. And in kind of processing this family trauma, she kind of integrates it. But anyway, I'm going to read from the beginning. Also, the book is funny, so just, yeah. It was ironic that Zhenya and Ben would come home from spending time with people who had kids and be so giddy with relief and self-righteousness over their decision not to have any that it would make them want to fuck. They had just gotten back from seeing a high school friend of Ben's who was in town to fundraise for the Obama campaign and had brought along his whole family. It was watching this friend try to hold a conversation while also wrangling his toddler and switching off with his tense wife on something ominously called the baby's bedtime routine that made Zhenya and Ben, now in their empty, quiet apartment, feel engorged with smugness. "You can't really go anywhere," Zhenya said, leaning out of the bathroom mid-floss to continue the shit-talking they'd started in the car. "You can't even have a conversation. Having kids makes people so rude. Can you imagine just letting your kids stand in front of your face, yelling and interrupting like that?" Ben was naked in bed already, absent-mindedly stroking his nipples. "It's true. What did we even talk about?" He'd ask me about work, and then as soon as I'd start to answer, he would shift his attention to his screaming child, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do in that situation. Like, am I supposed to wait? Am I supposed to answer over the screaming child? Zhenya spat in the sink and dried her mouth with a towel, laughing. "I would have loved to see you yell over that kid like you were in a loud bar or something." When she stepped out of the bathroom, Ben was using the sheet to fan his erection. "What are you going to do with that mouth?" he said in a funny voice. "I cleaned it just for you." She bared her teeth. Then they had sex freely with all their fluids sterilized. A strange image appeared to Zhenya right after she came of her grandmother boiling the drinking water. Vivid and metaphorical. She thought her grandmother could visit her like that only if she were dead. So even though it was late and even later on the East Coast, she called to make sure that her grandmother was still alive. Zhenya thought about that visitation again a few weeks later when she noticed that her period was late. Ben had gotten a vasectomy as soon as the union gave him health insurance, and she'd been on the pill for years, so she wasn't really worried. She took a pregnancy test just to confirm what she knew, that pregnancy was impossible. But the test was positive. She'd gotten the first pregnancy test from the dollar store, so she got 3 more from CVS in case the first one was defective. Why was it so cheap? It must have been wrong, she assured herself, as she peed on the more expensive ones in the pharmacy bathroom. It wasn't wrong. She was pregnant. The nausea started almost immediately. That day, during her shift at the hospital where she worked as a translator, she had frozen several times mid-sentence, hand up, eyes closed, waiting for the wave of nausea to pass over her. She knew that she would need to have an abortion. What other option was there? She'd had one before, and unlike in the dramatic way it was portrayed in movies and on TV, it wasn't a difficult choice. She wasn't traumatized afterward, and no part of her regretted that decision. Yet now, somehow, it did not feel like a possibility at all. Why was that? Ben had always been clear about not wanting children. Forcing a child on someone who didn't want one was barbaric, but hadn't she also been sure that she didn't want one until suddenly she did? She called her grandmother to tell her the news. Her grandmother had stopped being able to outwardly understand things, but it was still possible, Zhenya thought, that she was at least partially in there. Anyway, she was the only person whom Zhenya wanted to tell. She called the house, and her mother answered. She'd been hoping that it would be Nathaniel, her stepdad, because he lacked curiosity and never asked questions. He was the only father figure Zhenya had ever known, and yet she had never thought of him as dad. But he was a reliable presence. He could be counted on to shuffle up the stairs with a cordless phone and hold it to her grandmother's ear and not think anything of it afterward. Her mother, though, was a different story. Zhenichka, her mother Marina was already sighing. What gibberish. Don't use your grandmother's dying body as your confessor. You want to help your grandmother? Come back here once in a while and help me take care of her. Change your sheets, brush her hair, massage her legs with lotion so she doesn't get sores. Do something practical for once. Don't whisper bullshit into the phone while I hold it to her unhearing, unseeing, unthinking, but still somehow living head. It's grotesque. Then she hung up. But what did her mother know about what Baba Vera could or couldn't hear? And if her grandmother had been able to speak, she would have surely disdained the practical. She would have wanted exactly what Zhenya was offering, the contents of her heart. A few days later, Zhenya and Ben went out to dinner at the Thai place in the strip mall across the street. She thought she would tell Ben then, but she didn't. She felt instinctually protective of what was growing in her. Telling him, she sensed, would let the air out, or in. Wasn't that how Hemingway described an abortion in Hills Like White Elephants? It's an awfully simple operation, just let the air in. They never talked about it directly. She'd read that story in a high school English class after having her first abortion and laughed at the melodrama of it, laughed hysterically enough to be sent out into the hallway. Part of why she couldn't stop laughing was because the boy in her class who'd impregnated her had thought the story was about a lobotomy. And now what? She could at least feel the pain of the woman who was being strong-armed into something she didn't want. Ben was telling her about the reality show he edited, how one of the women was on a weird citrus diet and was eating oranges with the skin on. He'd edited a reel of her spitting seeds constantly into her hand. That woman's husband was rumored to be a psycho, maybe even a murderer or a serial predator. What if there was footage of him in the background of a scene they'd shot in their house holding a murder weapon? It's funny, Zhenya found herself saying, as though it related to what he'd just been talking about, that something can be nothing or everything depending on what value you assign it. She was thinking about how the last time she'd been pregnant, she had definitely thought of what was growing inside of her as cells, and this time already she'd begun thinking of it as a baby. Ben stared at her, waiting for her to follow up that vague statement with an example or an explanation, but she didn't. Instead, she lurched across the small restaurant to the bathroom and vomited up shrimp. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Katya. I I so enjoyed how your novel blended the past and the present, as well as the community of ghosts that you brought in as kind of commentary. And this is totally inappropriate, but I would love to request a spin-off with Paul and his his shenanigans, because I think there's something there. But
Paul is
thank
the
you.
psychic in the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and he goes through it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Katya, so much. Um, at this moment, I would like to introduce, before we move on, John Erickson, council member for the city of West Hollywood. John, are you here? Like a seance, we'll channel him.
Yes, well, with this amount of feminist power, I truly want to see what we can conjure up. I've been conjuring some bad things to go westward, eastward, but that's another topic for another feminist anthem another day. Hi, everyone. It's John Erickson, council member for the city of West Hollywood. I've been listening in the background. I'm so sorry for being late, but I just want to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Katya, for your reading. I just was able to experience it as someone who worked at Planned Parenthood for 8 years. The conversation and talking about abortion, talking about rights, talking about the stripping away of women's autonomy, which is connected to everything and anything as we see coming. And this book event, this series that you're doing right now from all of you is just truly incredible. So I just want to thank each and every one of you. Happy Women's History Month. It's the best month. And I say that, I know, as a cisgendered male, but men are awful. So, that's great. And so here we are to have an amazing time and to tell your story. So thank you so much, Cody. Thank you to everyone. And I hope you have the best, best, best time.
Thank you, John, for joining us, and we appreciate the support. Thank you. And with that, I would like to move on to Olga García Echeverría. And I've already done your bio, so I'll just pop it into the chat. But Olga, we'd love to hear you read.
Thank you. I'm obsessed with La Llorona, who is the Mexican weeping woman. And so I have a series of poems and different things that I have been writing and rewriting and just, I don't know, for years now, having a good time with. But also she's the Lady of Tears, so also crying with. This is a short poem. It's called Encarnación. And I'm gonna read this, and then I'm just gonna read through and transition into another piece that's more prosy. That is about immigration. Encarnación. I saw her tears flood a Missouri courthouse. La Llorona, encarnada, corralled, detained, imprisoned, deported, without her baby. They said it was her fault for working under a false Social Security at a chicken plant that got raided by ICE. They said it was her own fault for migrating. She is a migrating mother, migrating woman, body tattooed with visible and invisible etchings, remappings across land, ocean, sky, abdomen, heart. She is all the unmarked crossings across nations, states, paperless in the wind. She is flight and flesh of dreams, thorn thistle of thirst, blooming purple at the throat. Have you seen her? I saw her streaming, broken-faced on the internet, La Llorona, reincarnated. I saw her. You must have, for a split second, seen her too. We thought we were American. My mother, they said, isn't fully American. She's almost casi American. For decades, she was sin papeles, ilegal. Now she's resident, alien. How much does it take to become a citizen of the United States of America? How much does it cost? What must you give up to become a citizen of the United States of America? Show me your papers, show me your scars. How much blood does it take to become a citizen of the United States of America? My mother buried a baby in the United States of America. He was a citizen, she was not. Give me your soil, give me your labor, give me your blood, give me your babies, but still not quite good enough to be a full citizen of the United States of America. My mama had 6 babies, 3 in the United States of Mexico, 3 in the United States of America. 3 babies allá, 3 babies acá. Los de allá got stamped illegal aliens. Los de acá got stamped American citizens. My siblings and I would stare at one another bewildered. Citizen or alien? We're all the same blood, we'd say. We're all speaking the same languages. We're all living in the same apartment, going to the same schools, eating the same food, watching the same TV. So what's the difference? The birth soil, they said, the birth certificate, the law, the line, that line, always the line, although the lines and laws around citizenship are always changing. I mean, citizenship started off as an exclusive club for white foreign settlers. Citizenship, you couldn't be Indian, you couldn't be Black, you couldn't be, depending on your color, female. You couldn't even be white and poor and too radical. No radical Irish allowed. Later, you couldn't be Chinese, you couldn't be Mexican, even if you were sanitized with DDT. You couldn't be communist, still can't. You couldn't even have a fucking hernia, even if you got that hernia carrying heavy loads for a warehouse in the United States of America. My father, citizenship denied. Growing up, you thought you were American, but then you got put into a special classroom for kids who didn't speak English. Only you did speak English, just not American enough English. You thought you were American, right? But you got detained at the airport because of your surname. You thought you were American, but you got pulled over in your birth city and harassed because of the color of your skin. You thought you were American, but you got told to go back to where you came from because of your un-American accent, your un-American features. You thought you were American, but you got called a terrorist for speaking up against genocide and wearing a keffiyeh. You thought you were American, but you got labeled enemy of the state for exercising your constitutional right to protest. You thought you were American, but they kept saying, let's make America great again without you. You thought you were American, but turns out you're just an anchor baby. I'm an anchor baby, you're an anchor baby. Wouldn't you like to be an anchor baby too? Who's afraid of an anchor baby? Everyone. We must go to the capital of the United States of America, to the White House, and visit the first family of anchor babies. And if you're still afraid or confused, you should remember that all the great white people in the continent of America are essentially intergenerational anchor babies. They thought they were American, but... And I'm going to stop there.
Well, I'm clapping for you because that was really powerful and I very much enjoyed it. Thank you, Olga. Very much appreciate you sharing those poems with us tonight. And next, Angelina, I owe you an apology. I skipped over you before. I'm sorry. So if you'd like to include a discussion about the difficult subjects that you tackle in your work, please do. And the clock is not ticking.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll talk about my what has been a challenge that I've been working against, and that has been shame. Growing up, there were such unthinkable things happening that as an adult, I thought I refused to normalize that. And my writing goes back to remember what happened. I'm in my 50s now. My siblings are, all of the friends that I grew up with. And, we saw people get murdered. And we went to schools that were super alienating. And when you live with these things day after day, it affects you. And because we don't talk about it, we don't know how it's showing up in our life. And so I write about these things, and sometimes my people say, why do you write about such sad things? And at the same time, they remember when they read what I write and start to open up, like that was hard, that was sad, and finding where does that live and how does it show up. On the topic of being fearless, I really want to challenge all of us and whoever is in the audience, whatever people are feeling at this time. I want us to remember that there are communities in the United States who have been feeling this for a long time, and Olga has referred to it already. It's really important because these generalizations about, our democracy being in jeopardy, right? Um, Leonard Peltier was just released from prison. That was not democracy working for Leonard Peltier. And there are so many examples of democracy not working, in communities in the United States that, for us to suddenly at this time talk about fearlessness and, constitutional crisis. First of all, the Constitution wasn't even written, for my community, right? Black community, for the Native community. So it's good. It's good that whatever, Katya mentioned, not Katya, I'm sorry, he mentioned empathy. And I think it's really good for us that when we're struggling and, when we're afraid, that can imagine that empathy, that creative empathy, knowing that that sense of vulnerability, there are people around the world who have lived with that feeling of vulnerability. So at this time, we're all feeling that. And we have felt that. So a lot of my writing deals with that. And the last thing I want to say is, again, in terms of feeling things are really unstable right now, they've been stable for me my whole life. And it really wasn't until where I'm like, okay, I have a future. Now this is happening. I'm like, fuck, I don't have a fucking future. All that this administration right now is doing is taking me back to my childhood, to the vulnerability, the instability of my childhood that I've spent my whole life trying to recover from, right? And I feel that, going back to my mother's state of Nayarit, Mexico, in the 1500s, when the Spanish artists came through, one of the most terrible Spanish conquistadores through my state of Nayarit. He was so bad that Spain disowned him, stripped him of whatever they gave him, and then he was a nobody. But when we're thinking of fearless, the women of my generation survived what the Spaniards did to them. And that just kept going. And then my mother and my grandparents as well. So I wrote this book, Maestra, and I've been in elementary education for almost 30 years. And I see how for Latino students, the system sets them up to reduce the same outcomes. Olga taught about ICE. Or no, you didn't. You talked about Laima. So I have a poem in here. And it goes like this. Señor Sáenz, are you afraid of La Llorona? No, mijo. I'm afraid of ICE, are the creators of La Llorona. So all of these poems are about my almost 30 years of teaching. Again, thinking this, just everyone is fearless. Walking down the hallway, I compliment my student on the wonderful essay about his love for his father. I ask him why he was absent. He said because he took his father to the border to catch a flight back to porque no tiene papeles. This student sat in front of me all day today. He did his work, he laughed with his friends, and he carried on. But that moment when I realized he spent his weekend, we locked eyes and he began to cry, and so did I. Fearlessness, right? What is family separation, and what does it mean when you lose your parent, when you're separated from your parent? Coming back to, incarnation has been a theme in my life and continues to be. And again, thinking about constitutional crisis and, it's all going to hell. And feeling like it's been hell for a really long time. So in Edgecliff, in my first book, Edgecliff, there's a poem, my mother getting stopped by LAPD in the 70s. And they ended up beating my mother up and putting her in civil brand. And there's a poem about that. And so this talks about, again, how these traumas continue to resurface. And as a teacher, teaching predominantly brown schools the whole time, I kept seeing my students going through the things that I went through growing up. And so then in my family, I keep seeing the dynamic circulating in my family and my family confronting this. Here it goes. Eating chalupa with my second students in the cafeteria. A colleague runs in. Ms. Sáenz, the police have your brother at the entrance. I sprint toward the office. I find my leader in the hallway, hands up against the wall, an officer forcing him to go outside. Sin pensar, I run straight to them, like lightning, grab my little brother, who was 20 at the time, and begin to scream at the officers from the top of my lungs, my voice a lava rage. I want to incinerate them. My principal, the office staff, and other teachers come out. The officers said that my brother fit the description of someone they were looking for, bald and brown. And since he was running into the school, they came after him. I told them he was running into the school to pick up paperwork to be a teacher assistant. And because he wanted to catch the bus that was turning around a stop ahead and coming back in a few minutes, you fucking assholes. I'm sobbing at this point. My brother is sitting in the office. The principal tells the police to leave. I can't get myself together. They disperse my class and send me home. I ask someone to escort us to the car because the police are still out front. We drive home crying. I sleep for the rest of the day. So again, and I'll read the last one. There's people in this country who have not been comfortable and who are negotiating a lot all the time. So last one is my son is now 15. 2 years ago, as part of school volunteer, he had to do volunteering, and he volunteered at a predominantly brown school in Pasadena. And I wrote this poem based on what he told me, which again, now this is my child who is working with small children. Allende volunteers to tutor at an elementary school. Mama, I feel so bad for the boy I'm tutoring. He can't get up until he finishes his homework, and he never does his homework. What grade is he in? Kindergarten. What's his homework? Tracing. How many pages? 4. I wouldn't want to be 5 and trace 4 fucking pages of bullshit. I know, Mama. So I do a tracing race with him, and then he finishes, and he's able to go and play. That's called saving a brown boy's life, mijo. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelina, for sharing those works. And thank you for your long career as an educator and stepping in to help children who need it. Thank you. Um, let me check my notes. Yep, it is time. Kate, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, tough acts to follow. But because I go last, I get to say, wow, you all are amazing, and what a privilege to be able to hear from all of you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that work. So yeah, so now I get to talk about a vampire novel. So this is my book. It's called Fang Fiction. Oh, Zoom thinks it's in the background. There we go. Now we think it's my face. So Fang Fiction is a novel that I came up with in January of 2021 when I had been in COVID isolation for like 9 months, and I live alone, so it was like isolation. And I was working on another novel idea and it wasn't working, and I was having a meltdown about it. And I called my book agent in tears and I was like, I don't want to write this idea. She was like, okay, what do you want to write instead? And I was like, a girl wakes up in Buffy. And she was like, okay, well, what would happen next? And I was like, I don't know. So that was the flaw in the plan. I had to figure out what would happen next. And in doing that, one of the things I love about horror as a genre, and this novel is not horror, but obviously when we are writing about vampires, that's the tradition I'm writing in, is that different kinds of sort of monsters and apparitions are ways to externalize really human fears. So like ghosts are about grief and zombies are about death, and vampires are about sex and love and bodily autonomy, which are what I'm writing about as a writer of romantic comedies and romance novels. And so I had wanted for a long time to write a story about a sexual assault survivor. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh, a vampire novel is actually the right way to tell the story I want to tell. And so it's a story about an experience that I think is common to many women and also many queer folks and folks in communities of color, which is you think your life is going one way and you sort of think you know the path that you're on, but then there's an instance of abuse or harassment or assault and you become derailed and you're on suddenly it's not necessarily a bad path, it's just not the one you wanted. And so this is a story, I just liked the idea of like, well, what would it take to get you back to that original path? And what if the thing that took you back to that original path was like a magical vampire adventure? And so this is a story about a woman named Tess Rosenblum who was getting her PhD in comparative literature at Columbia University, and had that experience totally derailed when she was sexually assaulted by one of her classmates and started experiencing insomnia and panic attacks and other symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And she drops out of school and she leaves her best friend behind without ever saying why. And she has this other life now where she's the night manager of this quirky boutique hotel in Brooklyn, which is like, again, it's a cool life. It's not what she wanted. But sort of the one thing she's held on to from her past life is these vampire novels called Blood Feud that she is totally obsessed with, and that she and her best friend were obsessed with together. That was a thing that they shared. And Tess is part of this like internet conspiracy community who believes that the vampires in the novels are actually real. And so the story follows what happens when she finds out that indeed they are real. They are trapped on a mysterious island, and the sexy villain of the series needs her help. So the scene I'm going to read for you is a scene early in the novel where basically Tess has just found out that she was right this whole time. These vampires are real. She's been asked to go to this mysterious island, and to get there, she has to go to a place called Bar Between, which is this, sort of my take on a place like the Star Wars Cantina or even the Three Broomsticks from Harry Potter. It's like a bar between worlds that sort of exists outside of space and time. And Tess has gone to the bartender, who is, of course, a portal witch named Flora, to say, I need to go to this island and deliver a message to this vampire who I previously thought was pretend until tonight. And the scene I'm going to read you is what the conversation that Tess and the bartender have before she goes through this portal. Okay, then. Flora laid her hand over Tess's, and Tess felt suffused with warm energy. Let's read your tarot and get you on your way. My tarot? Tess was confused. What does that have to do with anything? You're embarking on a journey, Flora said matter-of-factly. We need to find out what you're seeking. No, Tess disagreed. I'm just delivering a message. I'll probably be right back here in an hour. Flora looked at Tess, but said nothing. Then she smiled. Let's just see what the cards say, okay? Flora opened a drawer beneath the bar and took out a gorgeous deck. They looked at least 100 years old, ornate illustrations printed on thick stock, tipped with foil accents that caught the light as Flora shuffled them, the cards flying through her fingers so quickly they looked like one big blur. Have you had a reading before? Flora asked, her eyes never leaving the cards. Only with friends, like at parties and stuff, Tess murmured. Never with an actual witch. That you know of, Flora winked. She put the deck of cards face down in front of Tess. Okay, they're warm. I need you to cut the deck twice with your left hand. Think about where you're going. Think about what you're leaving behind. And think about what you need. Tess tried to do what Flora said, but in truth, her mind was a swirling mess. The past 12 hours had completely flipped around her understanding of reality, and she wasn't sure how to locate herself in it at all, let alone what she needed to get out of it. She thought about Joni, the hope she felt when she opened the email from Dr. Vasquez asking if she wanted to come back to Colombia, and the smell of antique books. She thought about the shock of watching Octavia feed, the revulsion of Rick's hand on her shoulder, about a doorway opening in the wall of this strange bar, a flash of blue light, a chance to be free. She cut the deck twice with her left hand and looked at Flora. Good, Flora said. Now restack the deck with the same hand, put whatever pile you want on top, and draw a card. Just one? Tess asked, and Flora nodded. Tess considered the piles. Tess's left hand had faltered when cutting the second pile, the one now in the center, so it held only a few cards. For some reason, Tess felt that she ought to draw the card from this pile instead of the others. She restacked the deck accordingly and flipped over the card on top. The Eight of Swords, Flora nodded. Tell me what you see. Tess peered at the card. It didn't seem like a good one. It showed a woman tied up and blindfolded, surrounded by a circle of 8 swords sticking out of the ground. She's in trouble, Tess said softly. She knows she's about to die, or worse. She's trapped, and there's nothing she can do. Flora put her hand over Tess's, and Tess felt a surge of warm energy pass through her. Look again, Flora urged. Is anyone guarding the woman? Tess looked closely. No. And actually, there's an open space in the circle of swords. She could walk away, if only she'd take off the blindfold and see the path in front of her. What does that tell you? Flora asked. Tess considered this for a long moment. She thinks no one will help rescue her, but that doesn't matter, because really she has everything she needs to rescue herself. She just needs to open her eyes. Flora picked up the card and handed it to Tess. Take this with you to the aisle, she instructed. Deliver your message, but don't come back until you've done what the cards have asked. Tess looked down at the card and almost dropped it in surprise. The woman was gone from the illustration. Her blindfold and the ropes that had bound her lay in a pile in the center of the now empty circle of swords. Tess stared at the empty space where the woman had been. Was this a simple magic trick or something more? When she looked back up to ask, Flora was gone. What the actual fuck? Tess exclaimed, loud enough that the other customer stopped what they were doing to look. Sorry, Tess apologized. I didn't mean to. Sorry. They went back to what they were doing, and Tess slipped the tarot card into a little zippered pocket in her purse. She was confused. Was she just supposed to go out to the main hallway the way she came in? But as she surveyed the room, she saw a door in the corner with the word exit painted in black across its center. That hadn't been there when Tess walked in, had it? She walked over to the door, and she could hear something like white noise or a whisper. She couldn't explain how, but she knew, as strongly as she'd ever known anything in her life, that she was supposed to walk through this door. When she opened it, everything was dark and musty. She thought vaguely that it smelled exactly like her memory of the antique books. But in an instant, there was a buzz, a blip, a blackness, and then a flash of blue light. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that scene. And I enjoyed Tess's journey toward fearlessness because she doesn't start there at all. But she gets there in the end. And it was a fun ride. So thank you, Kate. We're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to be more in discussion mode. So I have a bunch of questions I can ask, but I also want to let the audience know that we can share your questions too. If you're in the Zoom room with us, you can raise your hand, put a question in there, and or sorry, you can use the Q&A function. You can press the Q&A button. We'll get your question into the mix. If you're here joining us via YouTube, you can put that question in the chat, and I will relay it to our participants. I have my own questions, but one thing that struck me while you were all reading and during our discussion earlier was this idea of writing against silence and how a writer's very careful consideration of damage or abuse or suffering or empathy that they feel about something can open up a path towards healing. Because then we can now talk about this thing that may have been shameful or may have been um, pushed to the side or not acknowledged. And so I'm just wondering, um, yeah, when you're in creative mode, when you're drafting, when you're trying to tap into this thing, um, how are you going about doing that? How are you breaking the silence? Figuratively and literally right now.
I can talk a little bit, I guess. I think for me, like in terms of like the process, a lot of times, I'm not thinking about, I think Olga, you had said you don't start off with like, oh, I'm going to talk about these big sort of ideas and themes. Like I don't start from that place, but it's just those ideas and themes are just in a lot of things that I think about. They're just baked into it. So it's not that I'm like I think everybody works differently, but I don't start off with like some sort of idea of something that I want to prove usually. It's more like I start off with something that I don't fully understand or that bothers me in some way. And it just it's like I'm just so obsessive and it's just something that I'm obsessing over. And it's funny because it's like I'm obsessing over these characters who don't exist, like I've created them and their problems and all of that. They're fictional characters because I'm a novelist. But they feel very real, to me. And as I sort of like can kind of try to understand, oftentimes it's like a character does something, and I know that's like my starting point, and I'm trying to understand like why would someone do that, And these are characters who are often very different from me, and I'm just trying to understand their point of view or their motivations or how the things in their life that they've experienced lead them to that this seems like a logical choice, or just like the choice that they would make. And I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like oftentimes that's kind of my starting point. And then I'm just, it kind of, ideally there like comes a point where it goes from it being something that I'm thinking about actively to something that it feels like I'm channeling from something larger than myself. And I'm just kind of, there's a character in my book who's channeling, this woman's story as a psychic. And often as a writer, that's exactly what it feels like for me too. Like I'm just channeling something. It feels very external from myself. And that, I mean, that's like at its best. Oftentimes it doesn't feel that way, but when it does feel that way, it feels very good, and I kind of know that I'm on the right track when it doesn't feel like it's being generated by me, but it feels like I'm just receiving it for something outside of myself.
Yeah, related to that, is there are there moments when that character surprises you with their choices? Because
Absolutely. It's like, I mean, it's so entertaining for me because I'm just like, you did what? Why? I mean, it never feels like it's something that I'm forcing, ideally. It feels like it's constantly a surprise because they really feel like these fully formed humans who are doing baffling things, and I'm just trying to kind of transcribe it and understand it.
For Angelina and Olga, when you're writing poetry, are the characters that appear in your poems, are they typically like drawn from your life and are reflective of things that you've been through or things that you've seen happen around you? Or do you ever have fictional characters in your poems?
My poems are totally autobiographical. And sometimes I will mix 5 different experiences through one person. So different people will tell me something, and then I'll put it all together and write a poem making it, like it happened to one person or all together. Now, and of course, I write my poem where I'm not disclosing the person event that I'm writing about. I write it in a way that it could be very generalized, and you would exactly know who I'm talking about.
I think I write a lot about a lot of my work is also autobiographical, but I also have characters that are pieces of things that I see glimpses of in the news, for example, stories I might read, also dreams. Those are the most fantastic and favorite pieces. And I always, like, I go to sleep sometimes and I say, okay, today I'm going to have a wonderful dream, whatever. It doesn't happen that way. They come when they come. But I have had dreams where I wake up and it's just so vivid. And then the first thing I do is try to write everything down. And then that actually becomes a piece because there's a story that was told in the dream. And those are very exciting because they're I mean, it's completely like a gift. And I like that magical part of it. And I get very obsessed, but there are also times where I'm not really writing because there's so many things going on, and we have to work, and then we have to like clean the house, and we have to like help take care of my family or whatever it is that we're doing. So I feel like one of the challenges is to carve out the time to not let those ideas or those feelings or those lines like disappear. So I do a lot of different things. Like I like to jot things down so that I don't forget. Sometimes I can't write, but I can actually record. So I might actually record a line or actually, record an idea that I have so that I can actually come back to it when I do have time. Sometimes the struggle is like there's not enough time to write. And then sometimes it's like the writer's block and not being able, like grappling with something. And for that, I like to read other authors because they inspire me, and I like to see the way they're using language, and it's very unexpected as well. There might be something that then leads me to something or opens, the writing process for me. being outside in nature and walking and moving and like not being in my head, but being more in my body, that also will open up like writing for me as well. But I think the most sensational thing is like, we're using the word obsessed. Like when you are taken, by a piece that you're working on, a story that you're working on, and you're just, you have to be in this world because you have to function, but really you're not. Like you're in this other realm, and it's a wonderful place to be in that in between world. And I always want to do it more, but we gotta pay the rent and go to work, whatever. Yeah.
Don't you find too, it's like you kind of need that break away from them. Like you get so close to them, the characters, and then like you need that time away. And then it's like, oh, now it's like when I come back to something months later, I'm like, oh, I see why what Katya was saying about like, why did you do that? And I'm like, oh, I understand why you did that. It's because of the backstory with your mom that I didn't put into chapter 3 yet. Like, and then suddenly it's like I understand them so much better. But I think it's like for me, like I kind of have to play tricks on myself and pretend I'm not writing something that other people are going to read ever when I'm in that, especially with early drafts, when I'm in that like really personal place where I think Katya said this too about like fiction can kind of provide that like buffer between your real life and what it is that you're writing. But in the early draft, sometimes that buffer is pretty thin, and it's like, oh, this is just word for word a conversation that I had, and we'll get to the part where it feels more like fiction later. But like my new book, that my third novel that I'm working on now, takes place in the world of politics, which I haven't written a book in that world before, and so it is sort of intrinsically a lot truer to my life than a book about reality television or vampires. And for this first draft, I had to my book agent is one of my best friends, and I sent her the chapters one at a time as I wrote them, which I've never done before. But it was just like we did a joke where it was like she's on the docks waiting for the next chapter from Dickens to arrive, and it was like a way to fool myself into thinking like this very personal story that's deeply imbued with experiences I've had it's not for public consumption. It's just me sending my friend 10 pages I wrote yesterday. And so like the way, like as with you said, like Tess doesn't start off being fearless, like Kate doesn't start off being fearless either. And it's like it's about finding that process that allows me to sort of get to the writing that feels braver, that feels more personal, that feels like something I'm really proud to put into the world. But sometimes it's not always easy to get there.
Yeah, we can learn from our characters, or we can learn from the language that we use to talk about something that we're exploring through our writing. And that can be kind of a source of new information or wisdom. We do only have a few minutes left, so I was wondering, I had said before, like a long list of questions we're not going to have time to get to about breaking the mold of what's expected, writing female characters, or where you're turning for inspiration or comfort right now. What are you reading or what are you working on? It's time for final thoughts if you want to share any.
I'll share what I'm reading. I'm currently reading The Ministry of Utmost Happiness by Arundhati Roy. And I just think she is such a fantastic writer and one of the most important thinkers of our time. And one of the things that I love about this book, it's so rich that a lot of times I feel like I get lost in it and I have to kind of go back and reread certain parts. I love books that I'm never going to finish reading. I feel this is one of those books, although I will finish it, but I'll go back to it. And I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about Arundhati Roy's work is that, this, when she talks about feminism, like she's like, one size does not fit all, right? She's talking about context, like, and I think that's so important, right? Like the context, feminism in the context of where, right? And when.
Yes.
And so in this book, the intersectionality of, transgender for one of her characters, color, caste, class, all of these different things that, really make it very complex in the context also of like rising Hindu nationalism and fascism. And then we have different characters, women characters who have, are in different places in all of those different things. So I just think that the complexity of it is a reflection, and I'm learning a lot about it just because she's writing a lot about the rise of fascism and also partition. And there's so many things that can be connected to other parts of the world, like what's happening right now in Palestine, what's happening here in the United States. So I highly recommend her. I think she's amazing. So that's who I'm reading and who I'm drawing inspiration from. I feel like she anchors me in the world of madness. It's like I read her and I'm like, okay, it makes sense. It's a little clearer. And that's what I'm looking for in the books that I'm choosing to read. I need anchors and I need clarity as well, right? They're using language in these very precise and rich ways.
The Ministry of Utmost Happiness?
Yes, Arundhati Roy.
That's great. Thank you. Final thoughts? If not, I want to thank so much our guests for being here tonight. Katya Apekina, Olga García Echeverría, Angelina Sáenz, Kate Stayman-London. Thank you so much for being here. This was lovely, and I'm so glad we got to do this. You can find them online, read their books. They're amazing. And before we go, I do need to do a little shout out to our next event for WeHo Reads, which will be featuring Richard Blanco, who was President Obama's inaugural poet, and Kim Dower, a West Hollywood local, talking about poetry. That happens on April 16th, also online. And I can stop the share. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. I appreciate you. And good luck and bon voyage and good writing. I want to read more from each of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. That was wonderful.
You.
It's so cool to hear all of you read. I'm really excited to read more of your work.
And I guess one more thing to say is if anyone is going to AWP next week, WeHo Reads will have a table there, and we would love to connect and talk with you and put more work out there into the world.
Yeah, we're table 271, so it's kind of near, I think, the dining area. I think I don't know according to the map, but yeah, come say hi.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.